Hello, everyone. We're now at episode 2 of the Ukraine series from Danger by Degrees. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the people inside of Ukraine. Unlike in episode 1, where we talked about those who secured being refugees and having fled to neighboring countries, now we're going to focus on the people that are still in country, in Ukraine. So just like in the first episode, anybody who's been displaced, anybody who's basically an internal refugee or an internally displaced person or an IDP, generally speaking, you're going to need the same stuff as any refugee anywhere. You're going to need food, you're going to need grains, vegetables, so you're going to need stable food supplies. You're looking at, because someone has now been internally displaced, they're going to need things like kitchenware, so cooking utensils, glasses, forks, knives, anything that can cook, and serving trays or serving dishes. You're looking at personal hygiene items. So that's ways to keep themselves clean, because this way you prevent infection or exposure to certain types of pathogens by just washing your hands. So you're looking at soaps, you're looking at toothpaste, you're looking at combs, you're looking at shampoo, you're looking at cleanliness products. For women, you're also going to need certain type of feminine hygiene products. And, well, you can pretty much do the math on that. For if there's any children involved under the age of, say, 2, you're going to need, or newborns, you're going to need baby appropriate clothing, you're going to need diapers, you're going to need cleaning supplies to help keep that child clean after they do what children do. You're going to need child specific formulae. So with newborns, you're basically looking at formula, you're looking at child specific clothing, you're going to need diapers, you're going to need cleaning products for the children to make sure that they are cleaned after they've taken and messed up their diapers. With respect to clothing, you're going to be looking at shoes, you're looking at pants, socks, shirts, jackets. You're looking at, depending on what time of year, you're looking at refugees who are going to need winter clothing, and sometimes people, all that they've got is enough time to flee with a blanket to keep them warm, and maybe sandals, if that. With Ukraine, a lot of people haven't even had time to even process what's going on. They're literally being grabbed by their neighbors, or they're grabbing their children, and they're running, and they have no access to money, they've got no ID cards, they've basically just got what they've got with them, and they're getting out. In addition, the last thing that you think about is, well, people who are displaced also might need their educational materials. So if you're a student, a teenager, a preschooler, whatever, even into university, those who have fled are going to need sources of writing utensils, books. They're going to need access to their educational supplies if they get a chance to get back into school. And a lot of the times, the other things to think about: pets. What about those who are disabled? What about those persons who, well, have special needs? So you might have somebody who's intellectually disabled, you might have somebody who is physically disabled. They may need help walking, so they would need a walker or a wheelchair. When you're fleeing, the ground that you're on might not be physically appropriate for a walker. So how are they going to get around? So you got mobility issues. What about people who are autistic or are mentally challenged? How are they going to know what's going on? Are they going to be literally left to their own devices? So you got to have somebody who's guiding them. And what happens if they are easily agitated? What if they are behaviorally challenged persons? So you start thinking about all these special needs that go beyond just those who are fit and are able to run with their children. You can understand why, when you are dealing with people who are internally displaced, sometimes they can end up leaving behind loved ones because there's just no way of helping them, such as elderly, such as physically challenged, such as handicapped persons. The other things to consider right now: the internally displaced people that are inside of the Ukraine have other challenges as well. There are people who are caught right on the firing line. They're being caught right where the battle is going on. So they're being exposed to potential harm from explosives, explosions. They could be exposed to landmines. They could be exposed to unexploded ordnance. There are many secondary effects outside outside of just what's going on in the war. You can have a shell fired right next to your house and it doesn't go off right away. But if, say, a child all of a sudden finds something that looks like something that they could play with, it might be that shell, it might be an unexploded bomb, and before you know it, you have unintended, unnecessary secondary casualties. Another thing that's happening is those who are fleeing under fire are exposed to snipers, they're exposed to stray shells, they're exposed to really the threat and harm of war. They are not combatants. They are not properly trained. They are not people who are going out there to fight an enemy. They are just trying to get to safety. And unfortunately, in Ukraine, it now seems that people who are fleeing from the war zones are being used as political tools or as weapons in themselves. They're basically being used as bargaining chips to try to maybe draw out Ukrainian defenders or Russian defenders or what have you. People are being used as a means to carry on the war. And now they're just one more weapon that's being used against the government of Ukraine by Russians this time, but also they're just unfortunately in the crossfire. So to sum up, internally displaced people or the refugees that are within Ukraine, they're facing the loss of their housing, they're facing the loss of security, they have no food, they have no access to health care. People with special issues such as handicap, people who are physically disabled, people who have certain mental health conditions, or people who are intellectually disabled are further being denied the safe passage or any ability to survive this coming war because of the situation they're in. And further, people who are in the Ukraine are being exposed to stray shell fire, being caught in crossfires, or are potentially being exposed to acts of violence that could potentially kill them. In episode 3 coming up, join us as we're going to talk about what makes a good helper and what do the volunteers who are going to help the people have to look out for and really mentally prepare themselves for, and what do they do to help.